In recent times, it seems like Black Lives Matter has gone bigger than ever. With the unfortunate passing of George Floyd, more and more people are aware of Black Lives Matter. But when it comes to social movements, it is definitely not without its problems and critics, especially surrounding the nature of the protests of Black Lives Matter. Even the organization Black Lives Matter has been called into question in regards to its management. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Black Lives Matter started with three women in 2013. These women are Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. Black Lives Matter was made in response to the release of Trayvon Martin's killer, George Zimmerman. It has since become a member-led global network of more than 40 chapters. Chapters? What a weird way to describe the sections of your movement, but whatever, I digress. Black Lives Matter has these chapters, quote unquote, in the US, UK, and Canada. According to their site, they, and I quote, affirm our humanity, our contributions to society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression, end quote. In 2014, it grew like crazy after the death of Micheal Brown in Missouri and the death of Eric Gartner in New York, and it is brought up in the public eye whenever an incident involving the death of a black person occurs. More on that later. So the actual organization is called the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. The Black Lives Matter Global Network has a fiscal sponsorship with Thousand Currents. This profit handles Black Lives Matter finances. These finances include donations, and according to their website, their job is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities, quote unquote. From what I have seen, it seems like it is their job to fund and organize protests against the unjustified killing of African Americans. There have been disagreements in regard to what the organization should actually be doing. These disagreements are between moderate reform activists and strident abolition activists. The latter seeks to hold change in the criminal justice and political system. There is essentially a split between these two groups. An example is a disagreement between co-founders Garza and Tometi. Garza advocated for, and I quote, for staying outside of existing power structures. In contrast, Tometi has shown to advocate for kind of the opposite. She wanted to work with the Democratic Party to make legislative changes. Due to the relationship between the two going down the toilet, Tometi had a hand in the management of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation since December of 2015. So the Black Lives Matter movement is a completely different ballgame. First, a little history lesson. The movement's history coincides with incidents of police brutality against black and African Americans. The movement was born after the death of Trayvon Martin, but it didn't really catch fire until the death of Micheal Brown on August 9, 2014 in Missouri. The following year, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, and Megan Hockaday was killed by police. There were protests about these incidents and many more. 2016 saw the deaths of Deborah O'Donnell and Alton Sterling, which was followed by over 100 protests that happened across America. Also when Black Lives Matter caught on with celebrities. LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony opened an award ceremony talking about the recent deaths of black people, saying that enough is enough. This was also the year Colin Kaepernick took his highly controversial knee during the national anthem at an NFL game. In 2017, Black Lives Matter protesters was the counter to a white supremacist, quote-unquote, Unite the White rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. In 2018, Black Lives Matter continued to highlight the deaths of black people who lost their lives to police. This includes Grechario Mack, age 30, and Kenneth Ross Jr., age 25. In 2019, Isaiah Lewis was shot by police and killed. According to Cosmopolitan, quote-unquote, Black Lives Matter held a 100-strong rally in protest. In most recent times, George Floyd was killed in 2020 by police officer Eric Gartner. Eric Gartner was then later found guilty of second and third degree murder and also manslaughter in 2021. Now looking at the court news, Joe Biden, everyone's favorite US president, has made a statement on a series of police reforms. This has the main goal of revising the use of force policies. These reforms include the encouragement of the prohibition of chokeholds and quote-unquote neck restraints, except in cases where you need to have deadly force. No-knock entries have also been restricted and will only be allowed in cases of a soon-to-be threat of physical violence. As of recent, these orders cover 100,000 federal law enforcement and law officials, but Biden wants to take this a step further and apply this to 700,000 officers at the state and local status. This is coming from the hope that the public puts its faith back in the US police force. I have a lot to say here. Is anyone seeing a pattern here with the Black Lives Matter movement? Like, a black person is killed at the hands of police. There is an uproar and protests and riots follow. The heat dies down. A black person is killed once again and the cycle repeats itself. I am not seeing any actual change with this movement. As someone who I think is black, that isn't the way to go about things. Also with the riots, whenever a group of people is gathered for a demonstration to protest about a certain cause and they are filled with strong emotions about said cause, there is very little reasoning and logical calm thought happening in the said crowd. In this case, it's a mob mentality. One person pushes a cop and suddenly 10 other people are attacking said cops. The organization itself is pretty shady as well. In 2022, the New York Magazine released a damning article detailing how Black Lives Matter secretly purchased a $6 million California home with Black Lives Matter funds. Reports reveal that they purchased the home for making content that quote-unquote promotes social justice. Cullors has stated that the mansion is used as a safe place to create content and be a quote-unquote safe place. Quick side note, I don't think you need a mansion to create content and be a safe place. I mean, Google was launched in a garage, but I digress. It's also really shady how these purchases of the California campus, quote unquote, that they call it, took place in 2020, and we were just hearing about it a few months ago. It's been stated that the organization was planning to reveal the purchase, but if that New York Magazine article never came out, who knows if they would really do that. On even more interesting subjects, apparently Patrisse Cullors shot a few YouTube videos inside the mansion, one of them being of her making peach cobbler, which of course she has also admitted to the Associated Press that inside the mansion she threw a birthday party for her son and a gathering to celebrate Biden's inauguration. Last year, Micheal Brown Sr., father of a guy that was killed by a police officer in August 2014, insisted on money from the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation to help the people who live in Ferguson, and he has been having a tough time with receiving $1.2 million for a community center. I hope at this point you're picking up what I am putting down. It seems like the higher-ups of the organization are being fucking greedy and corrupt. When it comes to the demonstrations of Black Lives Matter, it seems like the line between protesting and a full-on riot is becoming foggier and foggier. When it comes to a group of people protesting about a cause and being emotional about said cause, a mob mentality can quickly take effect. Someone pushes a cop and suddenly 10 other people are doing the same thing. It's also really unfortunate that a movement and an idea that is in favor of the struggle of the black man and that has gained global attention at this point can be possibly mismanaged and corrupted. The organization itself is also now without its downfalls. It seems like they are being greedy and corrupt, taking the dollars people donated in good faith and used it to fill up their pockets and for their own personal use. The unnecessary purchase of a $6 million California home, the secrecy of purchasing said home, and questioning if the home is even being used for what it is stated to be used for, all give off the impression that this donated money is being used for personal gain. As a person of color, I still believe in the cause that started it all, to fight against police brutality inflicted on Black and African Americans.
Very honest with you, $90 million. They basically use Black Americans for profit. Steve, ever since the George Floyd death, Black Lives Matter has profited from the George Floyd death. What have they done for the Black community? Where are the community centers? Where is the improvement in education? They use this money for personal gain, and you look at that house does not help Black Americans. It is basically blood money, Steve, and it's sickening and it's embarrassing. Black people were exploited. Black Americans were exploited by Black Lives Matter for the personal gain of a few.
Well, take